achievements and challenges that the board secretaries face today, basically, and discuss the strategies for success on this important role. I have with me here Linda. Welcome, Linda. And Masha. If I may, I'm just going to say 2 words about both of them. I'm sure you know, probably you know Masha more than Linda, and some of you know Linda already. So Linda has more than 35 years of experience in C-suite executive roles such as Chief Legal Officer, General Counsel, Chief of Compliance, and Company Secretary for listed companies in Singapore. She has worked for also companies, Temasek linked corporations. She has a very broad experience covering strategy, restructuring, corporate governance, ESG, you name it. She has a Bachelor of Laws and Masters of Laws from the National University of Singapore. And she has a Master of Science degree from ESSEC Business School, and she has also completed her General Manager program in Harvard Business School. She is a member of the Singapore Institute of Directors and the Institute of Corporate Directors of Malaysia. Linda, I've just selected a couple of things from your bio. It's way too long and too impressive. So I hope I've given you some, I've given the participants a glimpse of what you do, but I'm sure they'll get to know more about your experience from our discussion. Masha, so everyone knows Masha, I think. Masha has been the company secretary of Astico Property Management in Dubai since 2010. And prior to joining Astico, she was in the dispute resolution department of the US law firm in London for 7 years. And thereafter, the company secretary and general counsel at the DIFC fund management company. Masha has been a board member as well of the Association of Corporate Counsel Middle East and for the last 3 years, and is currently the vice president. She is former Iskamina steering committee member.
If I can interrupt, meanwhile, I've already president, so I must not have updated it. Yes, and I've been facilitator of the Hakama courses, and that's why I'm familiar with some of the faces, and I'm delighted very much to see you. And I'm using this opportunity to wish you a happy International Women's Day.
So that takes us directly to our first question. So today is the coincides with the International Women's Day. The first question, and apologies for the men with us here. What do you think? Do you think the board secretary is mainly being held by women or men? Linda, do you want to take a go before we start also checking with our other participants?
Oh, yeah, sure. So look, ladies and gentlemen, happy International Women's Day. Just echoing Masha's greeting earlier. I am so delighted to be here this afternoon, seeing so many wonderful ladies. You know, of course, some of you are not able to put on your video. I mean, it's just so many people. But otherwise, as always, being a friend of Hakama means getting to share my perspectives as an Asian-based corporate secretary in this context. And I would like to just, you know, with a preamble, a short preamble, I'd like to say that in my part of the world, it is very common to have ladies, females, women assume the role of the corporate secretary. And I think that could be, I'm afraid that I have to say, it could be a stereotype that when you are a corporate secretary, the very notion of the word secretary, there is this stereotypal depiction that it is a woman, it is a female. But look, this is rubbish, right? Because a secretary is just a definition of a role, of a position. So, however, at least in Asia, there has been a very big proliferation of young women, young adults graduating from, you know, universities, tertiary, high schools, and all that, coming forward to be corporate secretaries. And I'm going to just, you know, say one more thing and I'll pause there, which is that in my 35 years as a corporate secretary of different companies which are in Asia, very much part of the Asia, Singapore-based ecosystem, whether it's a bank or a commercial enterprise or an engineering conglomerate, Really, I think that I cannot avoid the fact that there has been a stereotype. And this stereotype is not necessarily bad, because I think I'm going to walk away from today's webinar. At the end of it, I want to challenge ourselves to rebrand ourselves as Chief Governance Officer. So let me pause there.
Excellent. Thank you, Linda, so much. Masha, I want to have your views. How do you think in the region the role has been evolving over the recent past? And obviously, we'll check again with Linda later. How is it different between Asia and the Middle East?
I personally think that here in this region there is no notion that this must be taken by a woman. I very strongly feel that there are quite a few men in this position. There is, of course, there is always this. I fully agree with Linda. There is always this concept, just because there is this word secretary, then there is immediately an assumption that it must be a woman. However, in this region there are quite a few men who are extremely able, who are extremely good, who are driving the notion of governance forward, and who are at the forefront of the development of the governance in the region. So I do not feel that here in the Middle East we're restricted to being, to this role being limited to women only, because I know quite a few men in very high governance positions and who have very high recognition. Of course, we shouldn't forget that always this role is a dual role in many instances, and we have quite a few general counsel who are assigned the role of the company secretary as well. So there are quite a few men. And no, I do not feel it's limited to the women, or should be limited to the women. But of course, somewhere there is a notion that woman is the one, and maybe it is true in the sense, because the attention to the detail, this whole, there is the big compliance bit of this job is so tedious, or can be so tedious. Here is Razi. We would like to hear his views on that. Is so tedious than woman, just by her DNA has easier time coping with that than a man. But as I say, I do not feel in this region we're restricted, or there is this strong notion just because it's a company secretary it must be a woman. Quite the opposite.
Razi, you want to add something?
Yes, please. I cannot agree more about the title secretary. It's actually it's not like a secretary rule. It's like we can agree that it's like a corporate or corporate governance officer, or whatever chief corporate officer. But we are trying to say that this position is very critical. And what I can see that the strong board secretary can create all the principle for between the board and the executive management to try to ensure that there's like a segregation between all of them. The process itself, there's a huge responsibility in this position, and should be like making like a balance between the board and the management as well, in order to ensure that there is a proper follow-up of the corporate governance, including but not limited to the material what we are discussing on, and to try to ensure that all is in order, and to avoid any decision that may like create a misinterpretation. Therefore, this is a strong rule, and I can believe that it's deserved that to not mention secretary, to change the title in the better title. However, with regard the woman in this role, for me, let's be honest, we should treat both man and woman as same. It depends on the education, the experience, background, and doesn't matter who's woman or man who's dealing with this position. We should just ensure the work is done in a proper way, and that's it. As usual, we are treating the woman and man as a equal.
Thank you, Razi.
Can't agree more with Razi here. Actually, remember I mentioned about the word secretary. So in common vernacular, secretary usually denotes a secretary to a managing director, secretary to a CEO, and so on and so forth. But because there is a prefix, and the prefix is company secretary, I certainly am of the view that puts the position of the company secretary in a very special place. Now, particularly because of the company laws that we are familiar with, the company secretary is a statutory position. And the statutory position is agnostic. It doesn't say it must be a male or a female. But regardless, in today's context of the corporate secretary or the company secretary, I think that what we would like to discuss are really about the challenges that we are facing. And if I may kick it off,
Yes,
the
please.
one big challenge that I always get, and through my many decades of practice as a corporate secretary, is we are unable to have management help us put together the board pack without any changes and in a timely manner. So I don't know if our colleagues here today can, resonate with my difficulty. So I said 7 days, you have to put in all the papers. After 7 days, the curtains come down. You cannot amend the papers anymore. But guess what? Trickle in. Oh, Linda, I need to change pages 47, 48, 49. My statement has been just clipped by the auditors. And it just drives me mad. Okay, so just want to hear others' views about this.
Masha, can you talk to us about the most difficult challenge, and we'll directly then move to Hala. I think we have Hala has raised her hand.
Board pack is a big issue. The board pack is always a big issue. It's just generally flow of information. I think the biggest challenge is keep the information flowing, because we as the servants of the board, in the best meaning of this word, as the conduit, the biggest challenge is to ensure that the adequate information which covers all essential points for the directors to be able to take a decision is shared between the board and the executive management. And that's I think this is one of the most important roles that the secretary needs to play, and this is the one which is connected to the board pack and just generally. Yeah.
Hello, do you wanna share
Yes.
your challenge?
Basically, yes, board packs, it's an agony, especially when it comes to credit proposals and strategy submissions. But actually, what I have noticed recently from my experience as a company secretary, that one of the biggest challenges that we face is maintaining this balance between the CEO and the board or chairman. I think this is the biggest challenge that we face on a daily basis. For instance, you can be sitting here in your office, you're surrounded by the EMC members, by the executive management. You are a member of the executive management committee, but you also report to the board and you have a responsibility towards the board. So this is a very, very critical relationship that you are maintaining. It's like you have to do tiptoe and making sure.
Can someone please mute their mic? Yeah.
So I think this is one of the main. Couldn't agree anymore with the approach of the management, but you have to also to follow what the chairman and the board tells you. So how you play it there, and how a lot of politics involved. So I think we are more of a diplomats. It's one of the main traits I think that company secretaries need to possess, is this diplomatic tactics to handle the day-to-day business.
I think Hala, you nailed it on this topic, and next is gonna come the emotional intelligence, it. But definitely, anyone is facing challenges, for example, in setting their the workload plan for the board, for example. Is there any challenges in that when you set the annual agenda, for example? Is it been changing too many times? How is it being, perceived or accepted?
Yeah,
Linda,
actually-
any views? Razi, perfect.
Yeah, actually, this is a common everywhere, that sometimes change from time to time, especially when you have like a presentation and there is, for example, counting for the account opening for digital or something. This is like updated day by day. But the end of the day, the perfect is to have a cut time and to submit the document. Any additional document can be presented before the board as additional paper or as a verbal. And the end of the day, everything is recorded and we can reflect the situation as is. Again, as per Hala statement that sometime we have a difficulty for dealing with the board, or there's a politics for that. The good thing is you should not say no. You should say no with a nice way, not sharp no. It's like, yes, indeed, it's a perfect idea, but actually, according to Article 100, so and so is we are not allowed to do such kind of things. But at the end of the day, you start with a positive response, and but it's always but. When you have like a lot of but, I know is like annoying for the board, but at the end of the day, you have to protect the board itself and to protect the management as well. Actually, the minute of meeting, we are usually like having the minute of meeting. Minute of meeting is something like acknowledged by the board. And in case you have any issue in the minute of meeting, that means the board is acknowledging their error or their breach of the central bank or any other regulation. Therefore, we should like be careful when we are creating the memo. If in case of any item is submitted, we should like explain from regulation perspective, from legal perspective, in order to be having like a proper decision.
Excellent. Linda, you wanted to mention something? We
Yeah,
were talking about,
Yeah, quick
go
one. Before I think before we hand over the mic to Serene, she has her hand up. So I think that the emotional quotient together with the intelligent quotient have to really put it themselves at work during the board process. And I always remember, as a corporate secretary, I am the servant of the board. More importantly, a board meeting is the chairman's process. So I would rather that when you have the politics of play between how the wishes to run it and how the chairman wishes to run it, I think you toss the dice, it would naturally fall in the right place, which is because it's the chairman's process, it would naturally have to veer or lean towards the chairman's preference. So I would then say, CEO, if you like to add in a agenda item, let me check with the chairman. I'll come back to you as soon as possible. And sometimes if the chairman doesn't want to disrupt the order of things, we could always put it under any other business.
Serene?
So
I think you know.
yeah, sorry. So the main challenge that I think everyone is facing is having the calendar approved first of the year, and then we I know, and then we come to the tentative dates, and having board members in the UAE or outside the UAE. This is the most important challenge, that you need to make sure that you comply with both boards, with the timing, with the dates, and in regard of the agenda. We now, since I think most of the board companies or the company secretary, they are using the new platforms. It's kind of easier to amend and to add, as Linda said. So now you only play with the other businesses. So whatever comes in the last minute, you just add it to the other businesses. But again, the most important thing that to allow the board to read all of these subject or all of these agenda items at least less than 4 days. So this is the most important challenge, that's having the management who comes up with, let's say, a major item on the agenda, and here you get worried about if the board have the time to review it and comment on it during the meeting. And here where we have to make, this is the trick here, that where can we find the point that we can get the management to respect the 3 minimum days that to allow the board to go through the documents, review it, and give their inputs during the meeting. So I think for me, this is the challenge, especially coming to the end of the Q's, the financial years. If you have any one of sudden capital raised or whatsoever. So you need to allow them the most of the time to go through all the documents, to review and to give their inputs back to the management if there is any amendment that it have to be done. So this is the challenge for me, the calendar and the agenda.
Masha, can I have your view on how do you address this? And is the annual calendar for the board, does it help resolve issues and keep us away a bit from the other business item on the agenda?
I think, yeah, I think I really, really would like to support Linda in her opinion, where she says that we are but a servant to the board. So it's very difficult, because when you attend some meetings, there is this presumption that because you're a company secretary and you know governance, that you are the one who decides. And I think this is this very delicate balance where you need to build up a relationship where you're in a position to advise and to have a discussion and to explain what's best. And I think it is, of course, a huge problem with the information, with the information load and flow of information and the annual calendars. But I believe it's not possible if you just join the board, it's not possible to resolve. But I believe it is a process where you get to know each other and you explain, because you're the ones who are with the operation, so you know why the people are pushed and want to. But it's a whole discussion about, for example, the materiality of the information. It is actually the process which needs to be guided by the board of directors. The board of directors need to come back to you and say what their expectations are, and you know what the time limits are, and you are there as a conduit between the management and the board. But at the end of the day, we need somehow to encourage the board to take lead in this very essential role, or how they see their role and what they see it is essential for them in order to perform the task they were assigned to. So being, you know, for example, the cut-off date, which you are saying that you're not able to maintain because, you know, everyone wants to push it in. I think it's something where the board will help you to put an end to it and say that unless there is absolute materiality to this, i.e. it is essential, there is no way this is going to get through. And it doesn't matter how, and I believe if you have a good relationship with the CEO, he will understand why you're not letting it through. But I think the point that Linda has made is absolutely essential. It is the chairman's game. So we're there to assist the chairman, and we do the best we can. But at the end of the day, if we work with the chairman and we're able to build up a relationship, the chairman will help us with those tight spots that we're talking about the annual planning, about the board pack and the way it is set up. I think having a relationship with the chairman is absolutely essential. I mean, having a relationship with anyone. I think exactly, but it is because you need information from everyone. So, you know, how do you get it unless you're in good terms? So, you know, as someone started, was it Razi who started, you know, the issue of emotional intelligence? It's just, and you have to choose your battles. That's the bottom line. You have to choose your battles. You have to choose your battles. The board needs to do their job, but then the operations team needs to close the deal. So you have to choose your battles, where you say you have to climb down from your high horse, where you say that you know best how the process works, and you need to see that there is a workable solution for whatever the problem is.
Hello.
I just want to comment on something. I think the luckiest company secretaries are the ones who deal with an aligned management or CEO with the board. If they are all around on one track, this eases your job a lot. But where the real struggle is when each one of them talks from a different perspective, or they don't have an aligned agenda. The second thing I want to add also is what I use sometimes as a trick, choosing the battles and referring to the regulator, in a sense that whenever you have examinations, you have certain things that you cannot change, use it, address it to the regulator, convey the message, and when it comes in an official report, believe me, they will do it. So I think this is a very good tactic that I would like to share with everyone. Of course, all of you are experts, but this is recent, so I wanted to share my experience.
I think this is very, very relevant, Hala. Like I've seen now a lot of the companies are running the external or independent board evaluation. And so anyone struggling with their annual internal board evaluation? How is this being, you know, perceived?
So to be honest, this year it was kind of smooth. And I think since we have to do it every 3 years with an external part, this year was smooth, or even last year was smooth. due to COVID, due to all of these Zoom meetings, we didn't have the time to interact directly with the board. So it was kind of more smooth, even with the agenda items, even with the committees itself, it was smooth. But I think next year also depend on the, like on the board member, how many boards you have on your board. Like if you are going with 7 or to 9, I think it's smooth, but if you're gonna go more than 10 and 11, at that time I think the struggle is gonna be real. But this year I think it was smooth. Hala?
I'll tell you what I did. Hala, the main thing is that what happens is you're talking to people who are holding very prominent. They are prominent figures. They are representatives of the government. They know. They say they always know. They say we know it. We know. But the notion of corporate governance itself is not there yet, because I know you know what you're doing. I know that you have a lot of experience, but still there are certain aspects that we need to highlight and to focused on during your tenure as a board member. From my experience here in CBI, we did it internally. We've had external companies doing it for us, but as the law mentioned, now that we will start doing it, I feel that doing it through an external party, it makes your life easier, and also they will be more responsive and active. When you do it as a simple exercise internally with like more of a survey that you share and you share the results with the BNRC, it's not really that effective. But when you bring someone or a subject matter expert to do it, they are more collaborative, and they try to engage with the evaluator.
No, I agree. When in between, well, for companies in Singapore at least, we are not mandated to do the external evaluation every year. We do it once in 3 years. But otherwise, during the middle period before the external assurance or evaluation, we find that the company secretary is the one that has been charged or given the assignment to do the evaluation. Now, first, I have serious problems with it. Number one, we are often not in a position to truly, bring out or tease out the essence of certain directors' comments in evaluation. They may be too polite, or they may be very guarded about telling the company secretary things that they really don't want the company secretary to hear, because company secretary ultimately is a management person, right? Second problem that I have about internal evaluation is that the questionnaire tends to be either a 4-point scale or a 5-point scale, those at least those that I use, and they would normally say good, 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 they take the column that's good, and in the end, when you do your data analysis or you do some form of summary, you find that everything is hunky-dory. They don't ever give too much of that, give themselves away. As opposed to an external evaluator, as Hala mentioned, you get more frank discussion coming out. And of course, they are paid to be people who are able to extract the juices, the secret sauce about what does the audit chairman thinks about this, what does the remuneration chairman thinks about that, and that is something that they are trained to do. And of course, the analytics become richer. So I think that if we can persuade our chairpersons to do the external evaluation, a little bit more seriously and more regularly, would actually serve the board well.
I do not agree. I do not agree. By law, if you're a listed company in the UAE, the external party needs to be doing it every 3 years. I mean, I do not agree, and I agree. I agree, and I do not agree. The bottom line is, I think that internal is useful. Internal works if we know what we want to achieve. Bottom line is, I do not believe it even makes sense to invite external unless you know what you want to find out. And I strongly believe that if someone knows what they want to find out, it's you and I. It's not an external party. I'm afraid to say external party, in my opinion, they're paid way too much money and they go full Monty. They don't understand operations. They don't understand the questions. I think internal is absolutely essential, and internal is, I mean, by law, you have to do it every 3 years external anyway. But unless you know which questions to ask, this valuation, whether it is internal or external, it doesn't make any sense at all. And there are ways how to extract useful information internally. And I believe that you, as the person on the ground, is the one who needs to guide and lead this process. Because if an external party comes in and says, for example, oh, it's a real estate company, then the questions will be asking X, Y, and Z. But they don't know the operations. They don't know the background. They don't know what's really going on. You're the one who knows. You're the one who knows, or who has an inkling, or who has a discussion to know what you want to achieve. So I believe that internal evaluation is absolutely essential, and we as the COSECs are very well placed to ask the right questions. But one needs to think, and one needs to think what one wants to find out, and does one really want to find out? And if one finds out, what exactly is one going to do about it? That's my views.
An interesting point to add here is that basically even the internal, not even, but the internal evaluations are usually under the purview of the chairman, correct? And sometimes it is basically they task the nomination remuneration committee, and of course the board secretary is given the task to support basically.
But I think
So-
in practice, the COSEC is the one who drives
Yes.
it. Yes, of
Yeah,
course, the chairman
understand.
guides it, Zeina,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I think
Yeah.
the COSEC is the one who drives it, and I think that's the discussion which needs to take place. And I strongly believe the internal knows better than the external ones. I agree with Linda that, of course, they're better trained to get the answers, but answers to what? And what answers?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have many other participants, by the way. I would like to encourage any of the other participants. We're 31 today. We have a full house to check if anyone else would like to basically provide their insights as well into the topic. Maybe later. Razi, you had something to add meanwhile?
Yes, just I need the assessment of the board is very important, and I cannot agree more. Internally, we know all the in total and details what's going on, and will be better than external. However, but I recall in central bank regulation, it was like every 5 years to conduct a assessment by the external. I thought not 3 years. So
ESCA
every
3
5
years.
years, yeah.
ESCA 3 years. ESCA 3 years. But
ESCA something else. We are in banking sector. I think we should follow the corporate governance of central bank, which is 5 years. And it's why not every 5 years to conduct like to appoint some expert like how come like or any similar company to conduct their assessment in the board. However, there's 2 points to be added here. It's about out of agenda, as Serene highlighted that if there's any material that it's after the cut time, we can add it as out of agenda. I think it's better to have a definition of out of agenda. Out of agenda is like when you are doing the meeting, like or before one day or whatever, there's something come up which is urgent, and we should the board should decide on it. Is something related to the regulation, central bank, ESCA, something like that. We can add it as out of agenda. But if it's a business as normal, we should stop such kind of things, and we not add it as a out of agenda. This is my view in the out of agenda item, because usually, as per the regulation, we should have like a sufficient time for the board to review all the documentation in order to decide on it. It's not fair that you give them like some material to decide on, and they are not reviewed in total and details. This may affect the decision. Maybe they will come with the not correct decision, and this will lead to the consequence of the company itself. As a board secretary, we should stop such kind of practice and ensure that all the sufficient time for the board is like utilized in order to adopt a proper decision.
Thank you, Razi. I think we have a question from Manar Saleh. She's asking if the board tenure ends every 3 years, isn't it too late to do an evaluation then? Masha.
If I can quickly answer that, according to the board practice or a governance code, the term is 3 years, and the governance code is supplemented by the UAE companies law, which says the board is 3 years and the term is 3 years, which can be renewed indefinitely. So 3 years, 3 years, 3 years, 3 years. So no, it's not too late, because it's very often that the governance code recommendation is that you do a board review annually, and every 3 years it has to be conducted by an external party. And because the term of the board is 3 years, but which can be renewed indefinitely, so it does not really matter. I hope I've answered your question.
Linda, I
Just if
think.
I can,
Go
sorry,
ahead,
please.
Razi. Go ahead.
Just for me, is it
Passionate about governance. Here we see a person who's passionate about governance and
Yes,
about these
indeed,
whole
indeed.
issues. Yes.
Now, for me, RNC, is it responsible to make the assessment for the board of director? It's the three of them is a board of director. I think it's illogic to give the board of director. I believe that this is a rule of chairman. Chairman should conduct, a chairman should supervising, a chairman is the higher authority in the company, and he should evaluate the board of director itself and the board committee as well. It doesn't look like, for me, logic to send it to RNC in order to make the assessment, because out of 9 you will have 3 of them is part of this. What I believe is that chairman is like having the full authority to make the assessment and then release it. This is my own view, but I believe that it's part of RNC. But I believe, for me, is not a rule of RNC.
Razi, very valid point. And the question, that leads us basically to the question of and this is something that Linda started by talking about, is really the board secretary or the company secretary the chief governance officer? And how do you balance this role between the board secretary and being actually the chief governance officer? Can we have some insights from you on that?
Right. So colleagues, I feel very strongly that being a corporate secretary is a position of privilege. It's an honor. It's a position coming from a position of strength. So even though we are literally, servants of the board, we are the right hand, executive for the chairman, I think I would like to challenge us and, in fact, motivate all of us to be acting and behaving and conducting ourselves as chief governance officers. So technically, it means that we must be the first to know the governance regulations, the code of governance, and all other corporate governance related rules, listing rules, or any other corporate statutes and ancillary legislation and etc. or guidelines coming out from the regulators, from whatever governing bodies that there are. And one of the challenge that I face as a corporate secretary is that when I put my own frame of mind to be a governance officer, I better make sure that I'm on top of every single briefing, new update, new change and developments. So how do I do this? Quite a lot of times people do this through getting a lot of feed, e-bulletins. We sign up for a lot of feeds from law firms, or from secretarial firms, or and even external auditors. So I think once we get the feed, we ourselves have to investigate further. We get our teams to also investigate further. And it would be so wonderful if after we get the feed, we digest, we summarize, we can do a update to the board, either on a quarterly basis or on a bi-monthly basis. A short summary of the governance changes and all that. And then give that same briefing also to the CEO and to the management at EMC or whatever you call it on a very, very regular basis. So thereby entrenching our own positions as the knowledge expert, the key officer in respect of all governance related matters. Yeah, so I'd like to hear views from our colleagues on this one.
Masha, you want to add to this? And I have always the question about the governance policies as well, drafting the policies, the frameworks, and what have you. So anyone has a comment?
Linda, if there is someone who doesn't feel empowered, that this is something we should work on, but this is not something which can come easily. And technical knowledge is a must, but it's not enough to, I think, and I think Linda has said that as well, to be in a position to be the advisor unless one has established a trust relationship with the board and or the chairman.
Given that we've talked about the standing, Masha, is there any like not preference, but is it, for example, if you have a legal background, does it give you an advantage versus any other type of education that you may have gone through? Like,
this is very interesting. We've just had this discussion last week. Does it really help to have legal education? Yes, it helps, but I don't think it's a must, and I don't think it's essential. Yes, it helps because there is lots of legislation that helps to read it. I think sound judgment is cannot be replaced by any degree. Ability, sound judgment is not something which is degreeable or which you can get in the university or whatever. I mean, of course it helps, but I don't think it's essential. I don't know what Linda thinks.
Yeah,
She
I
has legal,
completely
she
agree.
has legal education. I
she
don't
has
think
legal background
it's
as well. Exactly.
yeah.
Agree. Yeah, Hala?
I believe that nothing prepares you more for this role other than experience. Experience itself, yani working, whether you're a finance
Absolutely.
background, and you can see it in ESCA, even the regulation. It says that you can be from any background, mainly finance, legal, and mainly it was legal because the role was general counsel / company secretary. But you find I don't have a degree in law, but I feel that I can be a lawyer right now because of the amount of advice you give on a daily basis. This kind of role is all about trial and error, honestly speaking. Whatever works for your board, whatever, because if what works for my board here in CBI didn't work, for instance, with my board previously in Emirates NBD, in any other institution, you need to make sure that you adapt with the culture of the company. And this is, I think, the main important, actually the main trait that you need to have as a company secretary is to adopt and adapt.
Razi, you wanted to mention something, or you're just nodding,
Yes,
agreeing?
guys, I agree with you. And what I believe that, as mentioned earlier, that it's good to have a legal background, but at the end of the day, it's not a must. And we can handle it, and you can be close with your general counsel in case of if you have any things. For example, if there is any issue related to finance, you will be close with working with your CFO to understand the situation. And if there is something related to legal, you will be closely working with your general counsel in order to ensure that all is in order. And I think there's no harm even to discuss with your general counsel in case of there's something critical that you need to minute it, because the minute of meeting will be audited by central bank, by ESCA, and to ensure that what you reflect in the discussion, in the decision, is aligned with the law and regulations.
What about the position within the organization? I think this is something interesting. So the reporting line, this is, I think, something that many of us have dealt with directly or indirectly. So, Linda, how is it in Asia?
So in a good part of Asia, the corporate secretary naturally would report to the chairman of the board. And if the corporate secretary is also the corporate secretary or the secretary of the audit committee, she or he would also report to the audit committee chairman. So accordingly, correspondingly. However, in terms of administrative reporting on the administrative part, in terms of staff appraisal and so on and so forth, it will be two lines. The first line will be the chairman in terms of your performance or my performance as a corporate secretary. And the other line will be how I perform as a management staff. How do I help and assist others? How do I ensure that the company keeps itself very clean and always, adherent to the law, compliant and all that, keeping the company safe. And that would be typically to the chief executive officer. However, I didn't reach this position from the get-go. I was in fact reporting to CFOs, finance directors, financial controller in my early years. And then slowly, I think as all of us resonate, experiential learning comes about, we acquire knowledge, and as we rise through the ranks, we would then get that space or that position as we desire. And in fact, when I was much younger and as a corporate secretary, I even challenged the CFO. I said, how can I report to the CFO? Isn't there an inherent conflict? Because, you know, I have to be the one to tell my CFO what not to do as far as the corporate governance is concerned. And he took offense with me. So in the end, when I had enough number of years, I actually became his peer. Just a little tale to share.
Okay, that's interesting. I think it's a bit similar, Masha, right, in our region as well. Hala, sorry, we start with Hala. Hala, you raised your hand. You're on mute.
You're on mute.
I just wanted to say something. You were talking about the role itself in the organization and the reporting lines, but I smiled because I was thinking, how lucky we are as company secretaries, and this is what makes us special, that we are actually exposed to every single unit here in this bank. Yani, you attend these meetings, you attend credit, HR, risk, compliance, everything. So the amount of information and knowledge you will possess in your organization is massive. So I think we are the only employees who are actually exposed to each and every aspect of the company. So I feel it's a privilege. You're lucky. You learn a lot. You become aware of everything when it comes to credit proposals, to the risk, internal controls. Everything is there. So I enjoy it as a career. The second thing I wanted to comment about is the reporting line. Honestly speaking, on paper you can have everything, but in real life, in practice, it's totally different. You can be reporting to the board and the direct report, and everything is there, your contract is there, but at the end of the day, you find yourself reporting to the management or, let's say, the CEO. You have a very good relationship with the chief financial officer, the chief risk officer, but let's say administratively reporting to the CEO is a big thing. It's not only about approving your leaves and everything else. You do have responsibilities towards the management. So best practice, yes, we have it here in the UAE. It's changing. It's amazing. We have even ESCA law, central bank law. You need to have a direct reporting line to either a board, mainly to the board, and administratively to the CEO. But in practice, it's different. So this is my humble opinion.
Hala, I love this opinion. I love this opinion. I think at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter who you report to. The bottom line is you have to have independence of mind. That's the key. I agree with you, Linda. That's true. As always, I always keep saying regulation is one thing and real life is completely different. I believe Serene wanted to say something. She was raising her hand.
I want to elaborate on Hala. Exactly. So I think that independency, it's the most important thing. But again, when you work with a team, you need to also to make sure that you comply with the management, the CEO, the CFO. So here, usually, the corporate governance, as a corporate governance, they usually report to the compliance or the CFO, the company secretary, as an independent company secretary. Presenting the board governance only, they do report to the board, the chairman or the GRC chairman, or depend on the board hierarchy and the organization. But again, the connection between the company secretary along with the management is the major thing that you work on to make sure that there is a proper symphony between the board and the management. So it's not only approving, again, your leaves, your performance, whatsoever. So you learn a lot in due to attending all of these committees. You learn a lot being in contact with such a board members that they have their heavyweight in person or their value all over in whatever organization do they work. It's not only in your organization. So the independency is very important in one situation, just for the company secretary, as we agreed, me and Hala, that day. It was only about having your independency as a company secretary to ensure that you are not reflected, you don't have any conflict with the management themselves.
Very true. I have another question now that we have hopefully and finally came out of the crisis and the pandemic. We have to adapt a lot, right? I wanted to, ask the question, how do you feel that the role has changed? Of course, virtual meetings and what have you, but do you feel that there has been like a real change in the role and how you perceive it or how it is perceived by the board and the management?
Certainly, I think the pandemic has taught the whole world a lot of lessons. And as far as corporates are concerned, it has taught corporate to be more digitally savvy, and giving a lot of flexibility to staff to do co-working or hybrid type of setup for the convenience and the safety of staff. So I think in the board space, I personally have also experienced that many of the board meetings have not just gone online. You can set up the meeting online, which is not a terribly difficult thing to do. But also in terms of the shareholder meetings, there will be a lot of technology interventions that the corporate secretariat team had to learn overnight. We have to talk to a lot of the vendors and so on and so forth, until the time came where the board members, when Singapore was slowly bringing out people to come back to the office, and the board members are saying, can we still have online? We are very comfortable. We love online meetings. And I would then very, very politely say, it all is the chairman's call, chairman of the committee or chairman of the board. And sometimes, and that went along for maybe another 3-4 meetings, and after which everybody assembled back to the boardroom. So what I also found during this period was, apart from just the digital technology that is accorded to board meetings and shareholder meetings, I've also decided that one of the key things that we really, really have to pivot to would probably be digital technological tools for the board packs. So I think many companies, probably in your region, in UAE, in Dubai, have all gone to Diligent. You have gone to a lot of other, but in my part of the world, I think a lot of Asian companies are still, very manual. They like board packs that are hard arch files and all that. But I think it has got me thinking that, look, nobody is going to send the things to the board homes, board members' homes. We really got to think about it digitally. So, of course, that then creates or starts the impetus to call for certain solutions from Computershare, Diligent, BoardView, BoardVantage, and a lot of other vendors that came into the picture. And the team is learning a lot from these solutions.
Masha, I have another question that I would like to close with. How do you foresee the role to change further? So we've seen it, we haven't discussed it much because I think we've all covered that point, from administrative to more of a strategic advisor type of role, governance, technology savvy, as Linda has mentioned, driver of the board effectiveness and the efficiency in decision making. How do you feel that the role will develop further?
I feel it will get more complex as the world is getting more complex. The world is getting unpredictable. The world is getting dangerous. The world is getting there are many more new threats which didn't exist a couple of years ago. And I just feel the complexity of the role, the complexity of life around us is going to be reflected on the complexity of the decisions that the directors would need to take, and the complexity of their decision-making process will reflect on the skills which I would need to have. And for me personally, the first complexity I face is the being ESG savvy. So being able to not only understand regulations, but understand what it really means for the company for which I'm working for, and to understand how this can be implemented at the company level. I mean, of course, it's the task of the directors, but it is, if I am to assist them with that with that matter, I need to have more than simply basic understanding about net zero policy and net zero mechanisms and how this is being calculated by the company. So for me personally, at this in the next 6 months, let's say, for me personally, it's getting on top of the ESG agenda, beyond the simplistic view of growing the trees and whatever, and making sure that the policies are in place. This is my personal challenge.
And we've seen basically the case of the 11 directors at Shell, right? It tells you exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for bringing that up. That's exactly that example. I don't know whether others know about this Shell thing.
Yeah. So basically, just to bring them up to date, I'm sure everyone knows has been a lawsuit, right, against the 11 directors of Shell for basically not failing, but basically not meeting or managing to issue the strategy in relation to sustainability in light of some commitments for the climate change, etc. And this lawsuit has been brought by activists, but it has also been supported by some of the shareholders. So that tells you how things are evolving. Thank you, Masha, for bringing this. This is a very important point. Linda, as a closing point as well, how do you see the role changing further or evolving? Particularly, I want to talk about, you mentioned tech savvy and artificial intelligence and machine learning. Our board secretary is going to be replaced soon.
Yeah, I think just remember our experience calls for all the wisdom and the knowledge that we have garnered will bring us in good state. So whenever we have to deal, say, if board members are calling for technological tools, they don't want to see hard packs anymore. They want to see digital copies. You know what? Just step right ahead. Get the best, and of course at reasonable cost in terms of the digital tools. Get familiar, and I totally concur with Masha that the ESG space is something that we have to grapple with and grapple it tightly. We have to understand what the G stands for, and in terms of the governance, what are the different policies that we have to contribute towards. So, corporate secretaries, let's not rest on our laurels. My parting remark will be, really attempt to motivate and focus our roles to become governance officers as opposed to corporate secretaries, literally. Yeah. Would be a very great motivation. Thanks.
Yeah. Hala, as a closing
I
note.
think I'm doing a lot of talking here. I'm sorry. Shireen will kill me. She knows me. She always comments on that. I just have one thing to say about the evolvement of the role. The role has become very flexible. Company secretaries, the role was very rigid before. With the COVID, with the pandemic, with the changes of the meetings and the models itself, it has become more flexible in terms of including digital channels, including board meetings that are done are carried out through online channels. Everything, even assessments, everything. We are no longer using before you need to prepare these packs. You need to make sure that they are all attending in one room, traveling. I feel that it's much more flexible. We have evolved as company secretary with thinking a lot outside of the box and a lot of resilience that we have gained through during the whole experience of COVID. It has reflected a lot on the role.
Absolutely, Hala. I think Rabia has mentioned as well that under the new central bank rules and regulation, the board secretary now has additional responsibilities and tasks with the board of directors, and this is absolutely right. As we know, the board secretary is usually part of the director's liability insurance, right, Masha? But definitely, I think to sum it up, I think as Hala mentioned, it's becoming flexible. I think it has matured in the region and worldwide. So a nice word to use is maturity. And this goes along the same lines as the more complex regulation, the new tools that are given to board secretary to make his or her life easier, or to operate on a different level of strategically supporting the board and the chairman, being that a player in between the board and the management, the new trends and what have you. And I think the way forward, if I can have one takeaway from Linda's point is keep advancing, right? As a person in this role, you advance that role as opposed to, you know, just operate within the boundaries of that role. So Masha mentioned ESG for her, maybe this year. I don't know what's going to be next year. Linda kept saying, you know, go heart and soul on new topics. Hala mentioned how flexible it is. She enjoys it. New regulations that other participants have mentioned, basically. I think this is it for us for today. I hope people have enjoyed it. It's been a
Zena,
busy
can I
week.
just say something? It's a beautiful
please.
word that you ended with, the word maturity. And it touched me a lot. عن جد انه we have matured, and I think it's a great way to end this conversation and this whole dialogue because we are proving ourselves as, you know what, company secretaries are not secretaries. We are governance officials, we are officers, we are decision makers, we are key players in an organization.
And if I may add, Hala, it's through highs and lows, right? We've been through. I have during COVID been into the crisis management more than anything else. To be honest.
It is. I told you, you play every single role.
So I just want to mention one last thing because it's been a very busy week for Hawkama. But for those who are interested, I think we have our first face-to-face networking event tomorrow. It's meet with the CEO of Hawkama. It's at DIFC. I think some emails have been out, so it's not too late. You could still register. For those who are in Dubai, it's gonna be taking place, I think, at 11 to 12:30. And I think we have Dr. Ashraf who's going to be there, and Philip Armstrong also who's going to be joining us. So I hope you guys have enjoyed it. We're looking forward to having more of these sessions. This one has been a bit open and generic to kickstart the year, but we're looking for a more, you know, specialized, focused webinar going forward, discussing specific items to the core, basically. So I just want to thank everyone for their time. I want to thank Linda and Masha, also Hala, Razi, and Celine for their participation. You guys have been amazing. And the rest of the participants who have been with us yesterday and today and hopefully tomorrow. Thank you for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Thanks very much.
Happy International Women's Day again.
Happy International Women's Day. Absolutely. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.